know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.
Night Watch listeners, Rutgers fans, you hear my intro with the RU chant, but sadly for the last several weeks, Rutgers fans have not been able to cheer so vehemently and so happily because Rutgers, after starting out 3-0 at a conference, sadly fall twice in conference to 0-2 in conference, 3-2 overall. Two games that I think a lot of fans would love to have, if we were going to get to a bowl, which is the stated goal this year. I think for many of us, we wanted to go at least 6-6. I think most people knew that the schedule was really going to be difficult, especially towards the end, that the schedule was much less favorable this year than last year. And that, although the offense was probably going to take a step forward and be very good this year, that the defense had some concerns. We are seeing a lot of concerns on special teams. I don't know if everybody predicted that would happen. And just generally, it might be tough to get off the ground. We just wanted 6-6 in a bowl. And in my estimation, looking at the schedule, I think we probably needed to win one of those two games to feel good about our chances to go bowling at this juncture, at this first bye week here. But I wanted to sit down and do a little kind of bye week review and discussion about the season as we get round the corner and come back into more conference play. I'm putting in the description of this video, if you're watching on YouTube, a link to the RU review, which I do with Steve Tishner every week. And I said a lot, and he said a lot in that audio-only podcast. So click that and listen to that, too, if you haven't already. But I want to give some thoughts here, too. By the way, guys, click subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And also become a member and sponsor Night Watch. You can click the join button right below. And remember, this is also a part of the College Huddle Network. I know Mike Broadbent was on the Big Ten Huddle this week, and those guys over at College Huddle in general, I know there's some difference now in how things are going over there with the different shows, but it's a great network. I'm a part of it. It's part of the reason I can bring you game previews and whatnot. So check out the collegehuddle.com and some of the other guys on there covering college football around the country. But, this seems to now be starting to become a trend for Rutgers, where when Coach Schiano came back, we got to a level of respectability, or we returned to a level of respectability that we hadn't seen in at least a decade, right? And out the gate, we beat Michigan State, and we do that with the old Schiano recipe, takeaways. I think there were 3 turnovers at least in that game, playing viciously, playing above and beyond what maybe our capabilities on paper were. And we get to a point where instead of being a bottom feeder in the Big Ten who can't even handle its out-of-conference schedule, we start winning some games in the Big Ten. Teams that are bad in the conference, we are able to beat. Teams that are kind of on par with what we think we are, we're able to beat sometimes be competitive and lose. And then obviously the upper echelon, we're really unable to take care of business with. And somebody recently, I think it might have been Craig Epstein over on TKR, but he was saying that there's kind of 4 tiers in the Big Ten, right? There's the upper echelon, Ohio State, Michigan right now, even though we beat them in 2014, Oregon, these teams that are just, college football playoff contenders, legitimately national title contenders, and they're on the tier 1. And there's just a handful of them, maybe less, and it's a pipe dream to ever get on their level, right? Then you got tier 2, though. And tier 2 is the pretty good, traditional, perennial contending, respectable programs that are solid and respectable, and they give those tier 1 teams every now and then a run for their money in a scare. And those teams are, the Iowas, the Wisconsins of the league. And then you got tier 3, which I think Rutgers is in right now, which is, Rutgers, Minnesota, used to be Indiana, maybe it was tier 4. Now Indiana's up there, but you follow where I'm going with this. You know, a tier 4 would be, maybe you would say UCLA, but we're going to talk about UCLA in a minute, so maybe not. But Rutgers has had a lot of trouble progressing from being that real bottom feeder. They got up to tier 3 and they're respectable, but they've had a lot of trouble progressing beyond that tier 3, beyond that respectability. They're at a point where teams like Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, even in down years, Rutgers is having trouble beating them, even tit for tat. Now, we lose to Iowa 2 weeks ago at home on a night game, and you gift them a touchdown early on a kick return. Special teams has been abysmal. And there were other mishaps in that game. And once again, you have an opportunity to get above that ceiling on your tier 3 status this year, and you can't do it. And you had 2 games, Iowa and Minnesota. Minnesota you beat last year at home. You got them on the road. You're able to compete with them. It would be understandable if you dropped the game on the road to Minnesota because you're kind of in a place with them where you're going back and forth with each other. But not to mention Minnesota's down its star running back. Not to mention Minnesota's got some other issues, and we dominated them in the first half, but for terrible mistakes. A turnover that really cost us and a big play that got them down the field on the drive before that. But, you can lose to them on the road. But if you're going to do that and you want to be that tier 2 team or that bowl contending team, you got to take care of business at home against the down Iowa team then that's not very good on offense. And Rutgers was unable to do that this year. And so we dropped to 0-2. And what I'm looking at when I look at this current Big Ten landscape is another missed opportunity so far this year, just like we had missed opportunities last year, where you look at Penn State, by the way. Penn State takes a loss to Oregon, who comes into their house and beats them, which, that happens. Oregon's a really talented team. They're very good. They beat you. It's a tough game. You dust off, you move on. But then Penn State travels out to UCLA. UCLA, who made some changes on their staff, all of a sudden comes out firing. The quarterback's all over the place, making plays with his feet, completing plays downfield, and they come out and they get off to a quick start and a quick lead. Penn State kind of takes care of business here and there, but UCLA is able to hold them off. UCLA is there to put them away at the very end. It's just too little too late for Penn State. And you look at Penn State, a heralded team in the conference, and they're 0-2 in conference play. They're 3-2, right? Rutgers is tied with them at 0-2 in the conference. Imagine if Rutgers had taken care of just one of those 2 games, or if they'd taken care of both those games, the standings would look much different. Now, that's not to say that Rutgers would have vaulted to some, unfathomable heights. I mean, Penn State's losing to an Oregon team that's a contender at the highest levels in the country, and it's losing to a UCLA team, which Rutgers got dominated by last year because they had to travel all the way to the West Coast, and UCLA had an injection of enthusiasm in them because of some changes. I mean, it's not the same thing, right? But still, it's a missed opportunity. If you look at the way Rutgers' schedule shook out early versus the way a team like Penn State shook out, you could have positioned yourself a lot better in the conference and had some bragging rights about where you stood in the conference. But instead, you wind up just completely at the bottom of the standings again. And then Iowa goes on to play Indiana. They lose 20-15. And I don't know what you can glean from that. Indiana has been absolutely beastly lately. So I don't know. They scored 28 against Rutgers, 15 against Indiana. I don't know if you could extrapolate much from that. Iowa's offense hasn't been great. I think they're going to be better when it's all said and done. I said that already. I'll say that again. I mean, I think Indiana is a very good team at this point. Their defense looks beastly. They look like a legit contender. They're number 8 in the country. And it's kind of crazy when you see a team like Indiana. When we talk about vaulting that tier 3 status to tier 2 status, you look at a team like Indiana, who outside of the 1 year with Michael Penix at the helm, where we almost won on that trick play at the end, but for a forward pass call, which was questionable. Outside of that, Rutgers counted on beating Indiana almost every time they were on their schedule in order to get them bowl eligible, right? I mean, we had Gavin Wimsett, who was struggling to throw the ball, and we willed ourselves to a victory against Indiana that got us over the hump into a bowl game that we won 2 years ago, even though the last month of the season, we pretty much dropped every game because the schedule was tougher. And now Indiana is an upper tier team, number 8. Do I think they're going to contend with the big dogs? I don't think so. But they're number 8 in the country. They're proving that last year wasn't a fluke. And they turned it around. They turned it around with coaching. They turned it around with NIL money. They turned it around with a lot of things. But it just shows that those things can happen. Look at Miami in the ACC, and I know it's the ACC. And I don't know how they would be if they were playing in the Big Ten, and I don't think it would be as good. And we did beat them in that bowl game 2 years ago, and I think in a lot of ways we've surpassed them. But you look at them; they're having a great season, and they were kind of iffy, rebuild the old Miami swag, but they're back. I mean, teams can get on track, and they can get on track pretty fast. And what you're seeing with Rutgers right now is this. We got to respectability under Schiano 2.0, and I'm not taking anything away from that. But we are seeing what we're being told is this long, necessary slog to incremental improvement and eventually getting there, this mythical there that we're going to get to. And I haven't seen any of it. I've seen a team that's kind of been stuck in the mud and plateauing for the last 3 years. We went out and got a quarterback who was night and day better than the quarterback we had. We had a pretty much non-existent passing game with Gavin Wimsett at the helm. Non-existent passing game. And we got a quarterback who's having some of the best games that we've seen in years on the banks. And we're in the same place, basically, just trying to limp to 6-6 with a losing conference record just to get bowl eligible, as we were with Gavin Wimsett 2 years ago. And I really think that there are some things that we can point to that are the reason that Greg 1.0, even the early successes and quick return to respectability of Greg 2.0 are not coming to fruition or making a difference this year so far. And I think the problem is, and I said this in the offseason, before the season, we're missing the X factors that made Greg and his programs stand out and made them competitive and gave them an edge in years past. The X factors were extremely good special teams play, extremely efficient special teams play in the sense of game-changing plays like blocked kicks and electric returns and things like that. And we're missing an X factor on defense where we used to really develop guys in the secondary, at linebacker, really all 3 levels of the defense. Guys who were maybe a little under the radar, guys who, we wound up getting, but they just love football. They love the culture. These things Greg is always preaching about. And these guys were developed properly. And not only that, there were schematic X's and O's advantages that we had because he was able to scheme ways for our undersized, sometimes faster guys to make an impact on a game who otherwise might have been held in check if we were running something more traditional or trying to compete straight up in a traditional sense. And we are lacking those X factors in the program right now. We may have an offense that is pretty much efficient, a pretty good quarterback who, mind you, has committed some real bad errors and missteps in the last few weeks, including in the bowl game last year with the interception where sometimes he presses when the pressure's on. Now, that's not knocking Ethan. Ethan's still, it's important to recognize that we can acknowledge that Ethan is the best we've had in a very long time. That Greg Schiano has gotten us to a level we would have killed for, 7-8 years ago. But still say that there are deficiencies here that are holding us back. Now, nobody here is sitting here saying we want to go to contend for a national title. We need a spot in the college playoff. Nobody that I know in the fan base or the media sphere is saying that. Nobody. Well, what people are saying is we want to be bowl eligible. We want to at least win one of two that should be toss-up games when one of them is at home. So we're not asking for the world, and it's okay to call out some of the stuff here. Ethan has had some mishaps, but with that offense, and you look at these receivers, and you even look at Antoine Raymond, who is stepping up for a vaunted, great running back we had in Kyle Monangai. And last game, he had an excellent, just a really, really good game. Runs for over 160 yards. Makes something out of nothing when the coaching staff seemed content to hand the ball off on 3rd and long. He's going for first downs that make it more of a game. And yet, when we have an offense humming at that level and that type of legitimately upper echelon Big Ten talent on the roster on offense, we are completely and utterly lacking in those X factors on defense and special teams that we could have used desperately to get us to the next level. And it's got to be one of the most, and it is, as a fan, I'll tell you, it's one of the most frustrating, infuriating things that could happen to a fan. And now we go into Washington, another team that's looking for revenge. If you look at that game last year, I'm not taking anything away from Rutgers, and I continue to say and will continue to say forever until it's alleviated by a better season, that we had a huge missed opportunity last season. Rutgers should have won 8 or 9 games last season, period. That Nebraska game, the 14-7, where you hold this hyped quarterback, Raiola, you hold him to a terrible game, really. And you can't get over the goal line in 4 tries with Kyle Monangai. You don't challenge a play. Maybe he was over the goal line. You had an excuse about it. Refs told you it was definitive. I don't know how in that short time frame. You lose to Illinois and just a head-scratching, baffling coaching decision. Rutgers could have won 8 or 9 games last year. And now this year, you come in and you're missing opportunities again. But last year, you beat Washington at home, and I'm not taking anything away from them. And that could have again been part of a great season. Wound up not being, but you should have lost that game. There were many times in that game, and this is one of the things on TKR. Mike Broadbent pulled up that win probability, and he's big on that win probability stuff. And I love getting into it with him, and he brought it up. Rutgers' win probability throughout that game was extremely low. Washington, at several points in that game, really outplayed Rutgers, especially their offense. They missed field goals. They missed kicks at inopportune times. It happens when you're traveling all the way across the country and you're in a hostile environment at night, and the crowd was ruckus in Piscataway. But the fluky penalty, they block a field goal and they get a penalty for a guy running on the field a little bit early. I don't know if I've ever seen that penalty. And then we capitalized by throwing a touchdown pass immediately after that. There were a lot of fluky things in that game, even though it was at home. And even though our defense last year was really not good, you might argue, and I probably would argue, that it was better than this year's defense. And even guys that were hobbled and injured were better than some of the guys we got on the field now. And we still barely squeaked that game out by some kind of fluky miracle in some ways. And now you're going on the road to play this team. They look better. We look worse. And I don't know that we're going to come out of that game with a victory. Now, the one thing going for us is that Greg Schiano is notoriously good coming off a bye week. He knows how to make tweaks. He knows how to outsmart the opponent. He knows how to study the opponent. And we might have an X factor in him there. And if we can pull out a victory in Washington, I know that goes a very, very, very long way in turning the season around and alleviating a lot of these aggravations and alleviating a lot of this talk about, eventually getting there and whatnot. Because now we only need 2 more wins to get bowl eligible. And now you got a really key victory on the road against a good team. But it's unlikely. And once you get past that, if you were to lose that game out in Washington, you got to come home to a homecoming match against Oregon. And Oregon, they're coming in here. They beat Penn State at a whiteout game. I don't know what's going to happen against Oregon. you hope for some kind of miracle. But things can unravel really fast. And that doesn't mean that, this program, this regime's on the hot seat or anything like that. But it means that if, you need to rely on momentum to get guys to come here. Everybody has some kind of money. We don't even have that much money. So you've got to have some other thing to get guys to come to the banks and play ball, whether that's high school, whether that's keeping guys here, whether that's enticing transfers to come here to bolster this defense, which it desperately needs. Even with an AJ Sarace, who there's a lot of talk about coming up, you need to keep these receivers and these other offensive playmakers around him so that he can continue to have success the way Ethan's having, maybe surpass that success. You're going to need that team around him. The schedule stays difficult. You got to maintain some level of optimism and hype around a program. And if this thing goes as south as it can in the next few weeks, we're really going to have our back against the wall to salvage this thing against Purdue and Maryland. And you're going to have to find some upset against one of these teams, or I mean, maybe it's Penn State completely out of gas and just done by the end of the year, and we can take advantage of that. Or is Penn State at the end of the year looking, bloodthirsty and wants to clobber us just to make up for some of the pains this year? I don't know. But you got to find some other victory there, maybe Illinois, and you got to pray to beat both of those. But Purdue doesn't look like any type of slouch if you watch them this week. And Maryland is, you could say September, October, Maryland all you want, but they don't look like any kind of slouch or any kind of easy win either, especially with the way Rutgers is playing. They're looking at us the same way. So it's frustrating so far to see where we are. And I think a lot of it boils down to, these third quarters I keep talking about. We are completely inept in the third quarter. Other coaches are making adjustments. If you watch the game, once Minnesota started blitzing Ethan is when we started to have a lot more trouble. He was rushed. He was forcing things. He was pressing. And when he was pressured hard, our O-line wasn't up to par as much. And he got hit a bunch. And it seems like other teams are making adjustments, and Rutgers is struggling to match those adjustments or to counter adjust. And that, I think, is born of a stubbornness in the culture of this coaching staff, the same type of stubbornness that Greg brought up last year against Illinois. Well, no matter what, I was going to call timeout in that situation. Like, there are these pre-mapped game plans and these pre-mapped situational decisions that are made and stuck to prior to the game actually playing out, with very little elasticity to allow for changes on the fly. And what you see is other teams adjust on the fly, and in the third quarter and after halftime, they're able to counterpunch, and we really struggle to wake back up and get back on the mat and finish games. I mean, even Ohio almost beat us, a MAC team who is a good MAC team, but they almost beat us in the same way. And it's been going back all the way back to Virginia Tech last year. I mean, same type of thing. Come out of halftime, you're just not able to do anything, and you have to salvage it at the end. I think part of that is the counterpunch argument on the adjustments, and part of that is this staff thinking they can go into a shell, play helmet on helmet, boring football, and protect a fragile 2-touchdown, 1-touchdown, 10-point lead. And it has not worked, and it will not work. You need those X factors. You need those takeaways. You need solid special teams play, if not above and beyond special teams play. And you need to continue to take chances and to execute well and succeed on those risks you take on offense. And if the team can't do that collectively, the team really doesn't have much of a chance. And so you hope with the new regime in the university that they'll raise more money and Greg will have more resources at his disposal. But assuming he doesn't, you're going to need to step up in some regard, and the schedule just continues to get harder, and it doesn't get any easier. And so a season that started out with, let's face it, I had a lot of concerns about the season, about the defense. I was talking to fans well before the season saying I didn't love the Rob Smith hire. It made me nervous. The personnel on the defense made me nervous. I didn't trust the defense. I didn't think we'd be that great. And it's bearing out, but it's bearing out even worse than I thought. And I think another thing when it comes to this X factor thing is Greg's going to have to take some X factor chances on his hires. I know that after he took some chances early on in 2.0, He went back to guys he was familiar with, guys who were good at coaching, guys who he knew he could trust inside the locker room, inside the meeting rooms. For the most part, that paid dividends, especially with Harasimiak and Shiraka. But at this point, this Rob Smith hire, he probably, if he couldn't get his first three guys that he was familiar with, he probably sort of swung for somebody else he doesn't know. And there's rumors out there that, it's difficult to work for him, especially as a defensive coach. And he demands a heck of a lot. I think even Taekwon Underwood has been rumored to have said he demands a heck of a lot, even though he's cool with him. And maybe that's something that's turning people off. But whatever it is that's preventing him from getting a better hire in here to figure out ways to give the defense an advantage, it's got to be changed. It's got to be improved upon. He's got to find a way out of it. Now, just to touch on some stats in this first bye week through the 5 games we've been through, Ethan Kaliakmanis is currently 107 for 159, 1,399 yards, 67.3% completion rate. He's thrown 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. He's got a 157.4 quarterback rating. So Ethan Kaliakmanis, despite some of the mishaps in the last few games, despite some of the turnovers and performances that we wish he would have pulled through on, is still having a career season. Through 5 games, Ethan Kaliakmanis is still having an excellent year if you look at those numbers. Now, is he on pace still to break some of the records and things for Rutgers? That remains to be seen because he has slowed down a bit in the last couple games. Didn't get a bunch of touchdowns against Norfolk State. That hurt his overall chances of doing that, but he's having a really good season. And it would just be an absolute shame to waste the statistical season that this kid is having if we can't get more W's and at least get to a bowl game. I don't care if it's the Pinstripe Bowl. I don't care if it's in Detroit on the day after Christmas. I don't care what it is. Get somewhere. Get some bowl victory or chance at a victory for this season. Don't let this season just go in the toilet and have no postseason showing. It's just such a waste. Antoine Raymond, 87 carries, 471 yards. And I'm losing here, but having a good season, just a breakout year, a breakout game. And it was great to see. Again, I think he made a lot out of nothing in that game, but now we're back here. So Antoine Raymond, 87 carries, 471 yards. He's averaging 5.4 yards a carry, 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns. Okay, 5.4 a carry. Campbell was running at 5.4 a carry too. Sad that he went out and we lost him for the year. Benjamin, 23 carries, 106 yards, averaging 4.6. That's the other thing I don't understand about Greg. We see Sam Brown. Sam Brown, we've seen what he can do when he's healthy. We've seen what he's done in a Rutgers uniform, some serious memories, He's coming off a major leg injury. He's been suited up every game. I've seen him on the sideline. He's got the brace on, and I understand you want to work him back in at some point. Hopefully he'll be back to full strength next year is what I would think the hope would be. I know Campbell went down, but, the stuff Greg thinks is an X factor, like, hiding the injury thing from people and hiding who's going to play and, was playing Sam Brown for a series supposed to be some kind of X factor to throw the other team off? Where is Benjamin? Where is Deshaun Benjamin's carries? He's had a good skill set for a few years, and he didn't get a snap. What's going on? Sam Brown's easing his way in, but to ease him in the meat of a game in a pivotal situation, he gets pancaked on a blitz pickup, and I know I keep harping on it. He'll get it back. I'm not knocking the kid, but what is that the right game, the right time to put him in when you had Benjamin there? I just don't know what the point of that is with Greg. And, some of these guys that are sitting, Gurrier, and Benjamin. I mean, these guys, you better hold on to these guys next year too. This is not just because you held on to the whole team for 2 years doesn't mean you're going to hold on to the whole team forever and every year. I mean, this is every year there's a transfer window, and every year guys could want to go to greener pastures or more money or whatever it is. And, why aren't we playing these guys? Receiving, Duff actually edging Strong a little bit. Remember, Strong didn't play for one of the games, though, but 30 receptions for Duff, 420 yards, 14 average a catch, 3 touchdowns. Strong, 2 touchdowns on 29 receptions, 413 yards. DT Sheffield leading the pack, tied with Duff with 3 touchdowns, 20 receptions, 326 yards. I mean, you got talent here. Ben Black, only 3 receptions. I mean, they kept talking about working Ben Black into this offense, and he's made a couple showings. But, I know Duff and Strong are out there and they're beasts, but I'm just seeing a very static, this is who we got, this is what we run, this is what we do, this is who gets the ball. And like every third quarter, we're going to come out flat. Every first quarter, we're going to come out clicking on all cylinders. Every fourth quarter, we're going to be in a death struggle to a war of attrition to see who makes the least amount of mistakes to win the game. And the last 2 weeks, it's been Rutgers that screwed that up and made the mistakes and cost the game. And that's not a recipe for success. This team is going to have to start finding ways to get these X factors worked in, whether it's throwing Benjamin in there in a new wrinkle on offense no one's seen, whether it's getting Black involved in a new wrinkle that no one's ever seen, whether it's the superstars Duff and Strong, putting them in positions that teams don't expect, whether that's on defense, making a personnel switch up or a schematic switch up that makes teams scratch their heads, or on special teams, start returning the ball with some kind of unique return, play or something. Something's got to give, because the season is not lost yet, but it's much more difficult than it was. Much more difficult than it was. And unless they pull a rabbit out of a hat in the next 2 weeks, this is going to be an epic struggle to the bitter end this season, and it could really, really cause things to go off the rails. You had to try to get one of those last 2 games, and imagine if you had gotten both. Imagine if you had gotten both, where you would be right now. It just remains to be frustrating to be a Rutgers fan. I think the respectability we are grateful for now, I think it shows that, there is not some perpetual limitation on the ascension of this program, but we need X factors to get us over the hump. And we maybe will one day get, look at Indiana, look at the talent along that D line. These guys are massive. Maybe one day we'll get to that point where we finally are filled out at every level of every phase of the game, and we can just play helmet on helmet and play this old school style of football and still contend. But for now, we're going to need those X factors. And Coach Schiano is the guy who has delivered X factors for his entire career, especially at Rutgers. If anybody can deliver an X factor, it's him, but he's got to get on it. He's got to get on it. He's got to find a way to find his old X factor game and bring it to the banks, or we are going to be in for a very long season. Guys, I will be with you this week, hopefully to do a Washington preview. I'm working on putting that together. Either way, you're going to see me post-game on the rant. Obviously, make sure you're checking out Aaron Brightman and David Anderson. This is the time when they really shine. Dave is just an excellent X's and O's guy, and so there's a lot of stuff over there, good content for you to listen to. Obviously, TKR, my guys over there do an excellent job. These are reporters on the ground with Alec and Richie and Mike. They're also, again, deep dives into stats and numbers and lines and things like that. That's your go-to for that stuff. And you want that big picture conversational, heart-to-heart objective talk. You come here with Larry K, and I'm glad you've joined me so far on Night Watch. Make sure you check out the RU review. Make sure you check out the College Huddle, and make sure you click subscribe here and you click join to sponsor the show. And I will be with you guys pretty soon. Let's hope we can turn this season around. Go RU. Larry K is out.
I know you heard me on the radio flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.